I've been looking forward to speaking with my next guest. John Fugelsang is a comedian. He's a host, a radio host on Sirius XM, and he's now the author of a best-selling book on the New York Times bestseller list, which I have read and greatly enjoyed. The title of the book is Separation of Church and Hate, a Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. So first of all, John Fugelsang, well, first of all, how do I do on the title?
Beautiful, my goodness. I mean, look, if you can pronounce Fugelsang, the rest of that alliteration should be a breeze. And well done, Mr. Eskow. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. And yes, you never know how hard I worked. So as the title explains, the book is about. I would describe it as a guide for anyone who wants to push back on the sort of Christian perversion of Christianity that's so dominant right now. And how would you describe it?
Well, this book is a guide for any believer of any faith, or any atheist, or any agnostic, or anyone who will ever have to deal with an extreme right-wing Christian fundamentalist or Christian nationalist in their job, in their family, in their government, or in their social media feed. It offers practical tips to how to use the Bible, whether you believe in the Bible as literal fact or not, when dealing with a far right-wing Christian, to show that most of their views and policies they fight for don't have much to do with the actual teachings of that fella Jesus, who they wave around so bombastically like a prop. It's a book about how even if you are an atheist, if you are debating the issues that divide us with a right-wing Christian, chances are, from immigration to LGBTQ equality to poverty to healthcare policy, Jesus is probably on your side. And so it's a guide to, instead of calling names to your fundamentalist loved ones or coworkers, instead of dismissing them as superstitious bigots, to actually engage them and say what the Bible really says. And it's a book about what Christianity started out as, what it turned into, and why the best parts of it are still worth fighting for. And it's also about how all throughout history, every time authoritarian Christianity has done the opposite of what the faith teaches. I mean, whether we're talking about the Crusades or the doctrine of discovery, colonization, Columbus slaughtering the Taino people in the shadow of the cross, American slavery, the Holocaust, American segregation, homophobia, every time these Christians have done this kind of authoritarian policy, it's always been the Jesus followers and their allies who push back. The Crusades, St. Francis quit the war and preached peace. The, the priest on Columbus's boat, Bartolomeo de las Casas, wrote to the Queen to protest Columbus's atrocious treatment of the indigenous people. The first act of protest by a white person in this hemisphere was a priest against Columbus. I was never taught that in school growing up. Slavery was propped up by Christianity, but it was Christ followers like Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman or the Quakers who pushed back. Dietrich Bonhoeffer and many Christian martyrs stood up against Hitler. Throughout segregation, they propped that up with the Bible, and it was a Baptist preacher named MLK out of Atlanta who used scripture to shame white America out of the mutual destructive evil of segregation. And again, we've seen so many people talk their parents and grandparents out of so much homophobia in the last 30 years. There's an incredible history of Christian activism, and it's almost always manifested itself in resistance to Christian authoritarianism. And
And I
that's what my
wanted,
book's about. And there's jokes. And there's jokes.
all right, okay, those are short, but I want to get this out of the way right away. And you address it in the book. You mentioned atheists earlier. There are going to be a lot of people listening who say, why should I engage in debate about an entity I consider mythical
Right.
and a fable that I consider, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for a set
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
listeners that I consider irrelevant to 21st century life. You address it in the book, but why don't we
Yeah.
address
There's a
it
couple
now
good
so that
reasons
they
for
don't
it.
all tune out and I
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
lose
Listen, an atheist,
lose
I
my
get it.
audience?
I get it, atheists. These are Bronze Age goat herders who thought the sun revolved around the earth and religion should have no say in our governance. I get it, but here we are. They are using a very narrow, messed up right-wing version of Christianity. They're trying to force on the rest of us. Generally, I find that atheists tend to know scripture a lot better than most fundamentalist Christians I've encountered. And I'll give you a couple good reasons for it. Number one, for many atheists, these people aren't faceless nationalists. They're the family we still love. And many atheists know that they have family that will just call them Satanist, that will just dismiss them because when you're a fundamentalist, you speak for God. So if someone's against you, clearly they represent Satan. And I wrote this for people who have families like that because a lot of atheists still love their Christian families. And this can be a bridge to talk about certain issues and say, hey, maybe Jesus wasn't a dick. You can't be a homophobe and say you follow Jesus. And I lay out in the book why there is. And the most important reason I wanted to do this, Mr. Eskow, is because a lot of atheists I know really enjoy winning arguments with these people. And I wrote this book for atheists who enjoy a good verbal tussle to easily win an argument on their own terms, using that book they wave around and pretend to follow, but don't.
One of the things I liked about your book, John, was that it reclaims that sort of left Christian tradition, which has been lost. I mean, you're explicit that you're not claiming that the Democratic Party, for example, is the party of God,
No.
although you do say, and I agree with you, it's, certainly closer to the teachings of the
Much closer, light
ancient
years
church.
close. I would never say the Democratic Party is fighting directly for the teachings of Jesus. No way. And I run through all the reasons why not. But yeah, on most important issues, on poverty, on racism, on healthcare, on violence, on gun safety, on feminism, on women's rights, on LGBTQ rights, the Democrats at their worst are light years closer to the actual teachings of this Jewish mystic faith healer from 2,000 years ago than Trump era Republicanism, which remains the brazen, junk wagging opposite of everything Jesus ever talked about. I say all the time with these folks, I call my Sirius XM show every night. And I say, give me one actual teaching of Jesus that Donald Trump or the MAGA movement fight for. Chapter and verse, just one. Lots of atheists do this as well. You don't have to believe in the book as
Right.
absolute literal fact. And most Christians don't. Any Christian who says they believe in all of the Bible is literal fact either hasn't read it or is counting on you not reading it. There's a lot of truth in the Bible. I'm not going to say there's a lot of facts in the Bible. That's why it's called faith. The
Right.
opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty.
Right. And absolutely. And I was on a panel once with Sam Harris and the then pastor of the Riverside Church,
Wow. Right on.
and he was great. I mean, and I said to him, I had a bar mitzvah as a Jew, but I also lived with Southern Baptist relatives and played in the church band at tent revivals. So, if you need somebody to play, to teach you the course, I've got a mansion over the hilltop. I'm your boy. And I had a Catholic grandmother too, who scared me about hell when I was about 10 years old.
I'll bet.
So, but what I get out of all of it is and your book, among other things, is a reclaiming of, look, we're not saying any political party is a manifestation of heaven on earth, right? But a tepid, this is me talking at you, but
No, do it. Do
a
it.
tepid anti-poverty program in a highly unequal economy, it's certainly closer to the teachings of Jesus than dismantling poverty
Correct.
programs.
Correct.
And that's part of it. But and you also allude to some of the great, really left wing Christian movements, whether it's I don't recall. I don't think you mentioned liberation
I do
theology.
mention liberation. I compare liberation theology to the prosperity gospel.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
exactly. I knew it was lingering in there, and I had the honor of meeting Ernesto Cardinal, who was a
Oh my.
radical priest when I was
Yeah,
in
yeah,
college,
yeah.
and so they were impressive people. I certainly knew about Dorothy Day growing up, who you
Dorothy Day
also
was my
mentioned.
dad's hero. Yeah, I mean Dorothy
Yeah,
Day and Catholic worker movement. She was like part of the Holy Trinity. My father was an ex-Franciscan brother. My mother was an ex-nun who had worked as a nurse with lepers in Africa for years. My father's Holy Trinity was Gandhi, Dorothy Day, and Dr. King. He literally had a sketch collage of the three of them together over his bed. That's what I was raised in. And I had the kind of Catholic upbringing where I realized I could never afford the therapy I actually required, so I had to be a stand-up comic.
right. Well, that's a lot of stand-up comics get there that way.
It's not
Uh,
just neurotic Jews, folks. Not just neurotic Jews. There's
not anymore. Not,
plenty of damaged Gentiles out there as
it's
well.
for any neurotic person.
Exactly right.
Um, God bless America. But uh, the also, I would remind, since I have a good socialist, Marxist audience, Terry Eagleton in Great Britain is a devout Christian, Roman Catholic, I believe, and it also a devout Marxist. He's written books about both Karl Marx and Jesus
That's
Christ.
right.
And his book on Jesus Christ, Revolutionary Sacrifice, I believe is the name. So we're not really talking about apples and oranges here. We're talking about a continuum of ideas that's been hijacked. And I'll be honest with you, John
Yes.
Fugelsang, when I started to read your book, I was kind of like, do we need another book like this? And what I got out of it was we do, because none of the other books I've read have been sort of arming people, if you should pardon the expression, with counter arguments, but also you have great style. You have very American traditional satirical voice in a way. You'll forgive me for saying
Thank you.
so, but
Thank you.
it was kind of Mark Twain-esque, puncturing of pretense. So
I consider Mark Twain to have been a prophet, the way I consider Richard Pryor and George Carlin to be prophets.
yeah, and if you look at Twain's flag, for example, is skull and crossbones, whatever it was, American. He was not afraid to say what was on his mind, and he was
Yeah.
not afraid to offend people in order to deliver the truth. So
Yeah.
let's
And
go
that's why
to
Jesus's actual words are every bit as threatening to the power elite now as they were 2,000 years ago. We got to remember that a group of extreme conservative religious authorities working together with authoritarian government is literally what killed Jesus. And it's literally what's wrecking Christianity in our country right now. And you don't need to be a believer to use this book in dealing with these people because and this goes for conservative Christians too, nice conservatives who are appalled by
right.
all of this. Y'all are going to have to deal with the haters as well. And so this book just says, if you want to call them superstitious idiots and curse them out, go ahead. Not my place. But if you would like to actually try to convince the other people at the reunion, at the Thanksgiving dinner table, that you're right, you might have to model turning the other cheek a bit because nobody hates like a Christian who's just been told their hate isn't Christian. But I wanted to do a thing that was, yeah, reclaiming it, but also as a practical guide to give people tips to actually go into these debates on social media and whatnot. Because again, I just got tired of watching my mom and dad's religion used as this cloaking device for cruelty and meanness.
Yeah, and I have to say, even when I lived with my Southern Baptist relatives, it was maybe 1971, and their pastor was Brother Gene. He had an auto body shop. Nice guy, but they had all the like collections of Billy Graham, uh, not only books but speeches and so on, and but they were nothing like the Christians you see today. The Christianists, I should
Yeah,
say. They
yeah,
were, you'd think, well, Southern Baptists, they must have been evangelical, which they were. Uh, my uncle was from Texas and so on, a small town in Texas, but they believed in the principles essentially the way you laid them out, and uh, and they used to say to me, Richard, if there'd be prayer circle, and we hope Richard will love Jesus. And I would say, I do love Jesus. I
Oh, the
just,
coerciveness. I know.
you know,
I just say to these folks, you know what? Please cite one actual gospel teaching of Jesus Christ that Donald Trump or the MAGA movement fight for. Chapter and verse, please. Just one. It's a really
right.
simple question. I have asked it several hundred times in the last 10 years, sir. I've seldom ever gotten a direct answer, but you will find out how little these loudly pious people actually know their holy book.
Oh.
The only way to follow Donald Trump and Jesus is if you've never read either of their books.
Well, my favorite image of Donald Trump is him standing with the Bible
Upside
outside the
down.
church and holding the Bible upside down, which is, I
Upside
believe,
down.
the universally recognized sign of distress for a vessel. Um,
A
uh,
book he hadn't read in front of a church he hadn't been inside of.
right, exactly. Although it was just a few feet away from his then home.
Yeah.
Um, the so when we talk about, I'm really glad you mentioned also in the book the Pharisees and religious authorities, uh, and the point of that story, because growing up, identified largely as Jewish as a kid, and I just say I went to Hebrew school. I had a bar mitzvah in Hebrew,
Right on.
led the service, and he, did all the things, chanted the Haftorah in Hebrew, and uh, so I was very aware even then of anti-Semitism and people getting the story of the crucifixion so wrong,
Yeah.
that it was even clear to me as a kid. It was like, and I would see the movies, some of the movies. You didn't, I don't think you mentioned who was like blue-eyed Jeffrey Hunter. You mentioned
Jeffrey Hunter and Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah, he's British and blue-eyed and seems to be on some really good Xanax for the entire 10-hour movie. Yeah.
right, right, and of course he's got that long flowing hair. I think he's
Oh, yeah, divinely untouched by humidity. Ever notice that? Jesus, all
right.
straight long hair with no problems in the hot desert. Wow. That's a miracle right there.
Right. When our hair would get to a certain length, we would describe it as a hebro. It would
Ha!
just radiate out. It didn't fall naturally like the kind of Veronica Lake Jesus.
I had so much in this book originally about the depiction of Jesus in films and in books because white Jesus in Bibles in the 1800s set us up for centuries of suffering and cruelty. But Max von Sydow in The Greatest Story Ever Told plays Jesus as a white man with a Swedish accent who's Jewish in the Middle East. And it's a beautiful performance. I mean, I think there's a lot that's deeply offensive in Mel Gibson's Jesus snuff movie, but Jim Caviezel's the first actor in history to not have blue eyes and use colored contacts to look a bit more authentically Judean and Palestinian of the period. But what really surprised me was, none of these guys look Jewish. I mean, I love
No,
Willem Dafoe in the Scorsese movie. I love Willem Dafoe as Jewish, but like he's blonde. I mean, Willem Dafoe's not blonde, much less Jesus, and Scorsese makes him blonde in that film. In so many Jesus movies we grew up watching, you ever notice how the only characters who ever look Jewish are the evil Pharisees?
right.
Not the Romans. The Romans are always, oh, the Romans feel so bad they have to torture and scourge and execute this poor fella. Oh, we feel, oh, Pontius Pilate just can't stand how awful this feels inside. It's always the Pharisees, the Jewish ones who look Jewish, that
I'm
were always the villains.
You nailed that in your book, John Fugelsang. You get that so right, and it's so important. And even you, I didn't notice Jim Caviezel's eyes, and I'm glad you pointed that out.
He's very good in that movie. That film's a lot of crap, but he's very good in it.
And look, let's say what Jewish actor you can get? Dustin Hoffman. I mean, come on. The
Jewish actors were too busy playing Native Americans in Hollywood films. They couldn't get cast as apostles.
Listen, my uncle Jerry was Chief Yellow Cloud on Rin Tin Tin.
What am I saying? Yeah, there we go.
Hey, it's a little bit right. But now I lost my train. Before we get back to the religious authorities, I want to say
Pharisees, yeah.
that you nailed that. And the Mel Gibson movie, there's the scene where the the little Jewish kids, I think they are looking up at
Yeah, who
Jesus on the
little
cross.
Jewish kids. No, they're taunting Jesus. They're taunting
They're
Judas. They're taunting Judas after the crucifixion, and these little Jewish kids turn into demons.
demons,
That's
right?
not in the Bible.
And the right and the the Romans, the poor Romans. Well, we got to do this because it's foreordained. But uh, as you point out, they did all the bad stuff in the story every step of the way. And so the point of the story, I mean, I think even as a kid, I got this. So, wait a minute. No, I didn't as a kid, actually. My memory is like editing this up, but I get it now that no, it's when religion, it's, you say it perfectly. It's when religious authority gets in bed with an authoritarian government.
Yeah.
That's what's, it's not that they're Jews, that's the problem.
No, it's every religion. Every religion, the fundamentalist wing is the wing ruining it. This is what I say in the book. A lot of our atheist friends will say, oh, religion's responsible for all the oppression of women and violence and homophobia. And I hate to say it, but no. And I love atheists. I believe in them. But it's not all religion. The overwhelming majority of moderate and liberal Christians, Jews, and Muslims are getting along just fine right now, not bothering anybody, building families, businesses, going to school, communities. It's the far right wing, the fundamentalists of all the world's religions. These are the ones making the world so interesting for the rest of us. We see how destructive it is when they get in power, be it, I don't know, Netanyahu in Israel or Hamas in Palestine or the people behind Project 2025 in this country. Whenever fundamentalists, religious hardcore right-wing fundamentalists get in control and power, they always legislate the opposite of what their holy books teach us, and they're all the same. Right-wing fundamentalist Christians have more in common with right-wing fundamentalist Muslims than they do with the teachings of Christ. I lay out 5 very basic traits
Absolutely.
that they all share. All of them, all 5, women are always second-class citizens. The more conservative your religion is, the sect of your religion, the more God just likes men better. Sorry, men wrote it. Number 2, the sex hangups, right? Women, gay people enjoying sex, bad, only for procreation. Sex is demonized more and more the more fundamentalist it is. Number 3, violence is okay if my side does it. I'm on the side of the one true God. And if you're against me, you're on the side of Satan. So God's not going to mind violence I do on you. They rationalize it because they're the true believers. Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, maybe even Scientologists, they do it too. And then number 4, always a focus on punishment instead of healing, the more
Right.
conservative your faith is. And number 5, it is the persecution narrative, a penchant for victimhood. We are so oppressed, and therefore we are allowed to beat up on anybody we want. This victim bully justification for cruelty because we were treated this way. When Donald Trump ran for president, he didn't get the evangelicals to vote for him by promising to do anything Jesus talked about. He played up the persecution and said, you're under siege. Christians have been under siege for a long time. Dominant religion controls government, controls industry, controls Wall Street, controls the judiciary. But you're under siege, and I'm going to put you first. And that's how they do it. Spiritual narcissism. Jesus doesn't say, I'm going to
Right.
put you first. Jesus says the opposite. Jesus says, you got to pick up your cross and carry it every day if you want to follow me. You're not a better person than anybody else because you put up a damn tree in your house once a year and dance around and say my name in public. Jesus lays it out in Matthew 25. The things that make you a Christian nation, he gives instructions. What's going to send individuals and nations to heaven or hell? And it's 4 things. You take care of the poor, you take care of the sick, you welcome the stranger, and you're kind to people in jail. Nothing about how much money you give to church, how much you pray, nothing about how devoted you are, nothing about how you scream at women outside clinics or how much you persecute transgender children. Those 4 things. And that's why right-wing Christians will never put the teachings of Jesus on a classroom wall or a men's room wall because he still threatens their authoritarian power as much as he did 2,000 years ago. And that's why atheists may find his words very handy when dealing with these people who are blasphemers, who don't believe the teachings of Jesus any more than atheists believe the miracles of Jesus. And they're trying to take over our country.
And the problem with religions, as they're practiced as opposed to, as they're stimulated. It's like Soylent Green, right? Spoiler alert, they're people. And
Yeah.
so people bring their prejudices, their biases, their male privilege, their racial privilege.
That's what St. Paul did when he took over.
You really do a number on St. Paul in your book, Separation of Church and Hate. And I
I
was
defend him too.
happy to
I think
see
I
it.
defend him a bit too. I do defend him throughout the book. There's plenty of beautiful things he said. But yeah, Paul's responsible for Christianity right now. Everything good and bad about it. That ain't Jesus. That's his very sexually uptight PR guy who took over the operation when all the apostles were getting stoned to death by Paul's old friends back home.
Yeah, the guys who know how to market are not necessarily the ones preserving the purity of the message. And I mean, I don't mean
Oh,
to be crass at
it
all.
doesn't serve them.
Yeah,
It's their religion is power. They care about
nuance,
power, not Jesus.
right? And he was, going to the non-Jewish uh, participants and that kind of thing. By the way, are you familiar with the work of Martin E. Marty at the University of Chicago?
I might be. I'm not sure. Tell me.
He is very well. I think he's passed away, but he was a cleric and also, I believe, a sociologist. And he did a multidisciplinary study of religious believers in 5 continents. I think it was across
Amazing.
Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and the common thread he found is that roughly 20 to 25% of them were what we would describe as fundamentalists. So it
Yeah.
fits really well with your book and your point.
PRRI survey, by the way, found that about 20% of us are Christian nationalists, and maybe another 15% have Christian nationalist leaning. So it's about 33%, the same number that votes for Trump, 1/3 of us. And
Right.
yet they make up 2/3 of our Supreme Court.
Yes. Well, also with all due respect to my grandmother, Catholics are disproportionately represented on the Supreme
Isn't that
Court.
wacky? Catholics who don't really agree with Jesus when it comes to things like the death penalty, which he was decidedly against. Jesus never mentioned abortion. He came out against murdering sinners many times. I mean, he overturns eye for an eye in the Sermon on the Mount. He stopped an execution. He's commanded us to forgive 70 times 7. But I mean, he literally said only sinless people may execute. And these guys, they've spent 45 years thinking he was talking about abortion and gay people, and they're more than happy to execute prisoners and murder prisoners with and it's still murder if the state does it. I mean, like to me, and I wrote this book because I just got sick of this. Like, if you're gonna say that you want to criminalize abortion because you're so deeply Christian, which Jesus never mentioned, but you support the death penalty, which Jesus openly opposed, I don't think the rest of us are obliged to take their claims of Christianity or piety seriously anymore. And this book is about how to take away their camouflage.
Yeah, and no, absolutely, and it does that very effectively. I mean, I would say also these Catholic judges are in open defiance of their church and its authority.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
uh,
I mean,
as
there's not much difference from Sharia law to Scalia law, Mr. Esco.
well, yes, well, Sharia law, that's a whole other conversation we'll have to get to, but that's
But
supposed
again,
to be for
but it's the same
Muslims.
thing. It's
If you don't want to
conservative,
follow it,
conservative religious men controlling government.
right, right. And
That's Scalia.
take a look at halakha law in Judaism too. It's pretty much the same. And, they all, it's the authorities, it's power. You give a few men some power, and all
That's
of a
it.
sudden you got problems.
I call it church usher disease or CUD. You go to church and you see these guys who have a little bit of, they're the ushers, tell you where to sit. They got a little bit of power for the first time in their life. Oh my God, they're like landing Air Force One on the one way. You want to sit next to God? You talk to me. You go here, you people go there. Little bit of power makes a little librarian go nuts. Imagine that with an army. And
Right.
that's, they're not
Yeah.
fighting for it. I mean, America was not a Christian nation. You don't get to own people and claim you're Christian. It's the people who fought slavery who were the Christ followers. And I think that throughout history that's the difference, right? Christians and Christ followers. But what I learned about the Pharisees was this. A big mistake and sin that I've been guilty of is this lazy shorthand of dismissing any religious fundamentalist as a Pharisee. It's an easy word. It's a slur. Oh, I get a literary reference. These Pharisees, they look at Mike Johnson, these Pharisees. Well, that what we're doing when we do that is saying that the entire culture that began what is now modern rabbinical culture are all right-wing douchebags. And the reality is that there was incredible diversity amongst the Pharisees. Jesus was friends with many Pharisees. He's described it going hanging out with Pharisees at their house for dinner. Nicodemus was his friend. Many people believe Jesus was a Pharisee. So we've come so far in no longer blaming the Jews for Jesus's death anymore, but I'm still learning stuff all the time about my own brainwashing and colonization that I automatically assume Pharisees means right-wing authoritarian. And it wasn't. It was a small percentage of the Jewish political bosses who persecuted Jesus because they didn't like the fact that he threatens authoritarian structures. And that's why the modern Christian bosses don't want Jesus's teachings out there. They want us to talk about the manger, the miracles, and the cross, not the 3 years this guy spent talking.
Right, which, as you point out, is well, I forget. You said it was like you compared it to the careers of like some bands.
Oh yeah, like I don't
Uh,
I like he was a little less time than the Smiths and and oh, I don't remember now. Less time than the Smiths, more than the Sex Pistols and Cream, about the same time as Jimi Hendrix Experience was how long
right,
he was spent preaching.
and you pointed out that he traveled with three women, which is kind of like Leonard Skinner too. But
Well,
um,
he traveled with three women everywhere, but the men who wrote the Bible didn't count women as people. So instead of saying 15
15,
apostles,
right?
we got 12 apostles and three groupies. And and again, like Jesus is the biggest feminist in the Bible. The first people he returns to when he comes back are the women. The women are the only ones who don't abandon him. Everybody else abandons him except the women. And yet we've had, in the Catholic culture, 2,000 years of no knob, no job. I mean, based on the fact that a bunch of men 2,000 years ago think that God likes them better, and we're still watching this play out. I pray the Catholic Church realizes that they're going to need gay people and women a lot more than women need gay people in the Catholic Church.
Well, I think Francis might have had a better sense of that. We'll see
You're right.
how things play out. But
You're
and it
right.
is, you have an interesting background with your parents having both taken vows at one point. But again, I recommend the book. In
Thank
conclusion,
you.
my guest John Fugelsang, his new book is Separation of Church and Hate. This time you do
A
the
Sane Person's Guide to Taking Back the Bible from Fundamentalists, Fascists, and Flock-Fleecing Frauds. And Mr. Eskow, I want to thank you for your service and all you've done for politics, all you did for Senator Sanders, and it's really an honor to be on your show and to speak to your audience about my vulgar little vaudevillian Christian book. There's a lot of very dignified theologians and academics out there writing them. This is a comedian's take on it, and I hope the people will find it entertaining, above all.
well. I did. I certainly did. So John, thanks for coming on the program. Thanks for the kind words. I reciprocate, and we'll be right back after this.